Gentle dad. Just a little mom can hear my voice trembled slightly weak, like the sound of wind blowing through the crack of the door. My throat tightened with each word coming out with difficulty, as if I were trying to hold back something that was about to burst. My heart was pounding in my chest as if it were about to burst. My hands unconsciously tightened around the blanket. My breathing was no longer even. Every small sound in the quiet room made my heart scream. I will tell you my story. A story that I once thought I would keep hidden forever, never to be mentioned again. The heartbreaking thing is that the one at fault in this story is me. It is a story that seems so far-fetched and that could only happen in movies, but it happened in my real life, and no matter how much I want to forget what happened, it is still imprinted in my mind, haunting me every day. I think I will never be able to correct my mistakes or make peace with the I am a pretty girl living with my parents in the small town of Carmel by the Sea, California, is a peaceful and poetic place. My father, Adam, is the owner of a famous seafood restaurant in the area. He always takes good care of his body and likes to go to the gym. So even though he is nearly 50 years old, his body is still toned, strong, and looks much younger than his true age. He is strong, decisive, but always gentle with. My mother, Ella, is a literature teacher at the high school, reading books under the warm light, never forgetting to give me advice and deep love for my mother, who is the one who taught me how to live sincerely and emotionally from childhood to adulthood. I have always been surrounded by the love of both of whom have devoted all their hearts to caring for and protecting me. When I was a child, I would run to my father when he came home from work. I threw myself into his arms, my small arms wrapped around his neck, and hugged him hard because my father was always the safest, most comfortable place for me, as if being in his arms would solve everything. I didn't think much about it. I simply felt protected and cherished. I was also a liberal girl who liked fresh and lovely things. I would frequently choose the most exquisite and stunning item I could find for myself. I would run to my parents, spin around a few times, and wait for compliments, and because they loved me, my parents always smiled and complimented me, and those compliments, though simple, made me feel like the happiest girl in the world after every dinner when the whole family gathered around the TV screen. I had a habit of sitting on my father's lap, and he often held me in his arms. Those hugs were gentle and warm, and I grew up with that pampering to the point that I never wanted to go. But suddenly, every time I sat on my father's lap or raced to embrace him, the feeling was different. There was something unusual about the way he reacted that I couldn't help but notice. He no longer received my hugs naturally, like before. Instead, there was a pause. Sometimes his arms tightened a little more than usual. The way my father looked at me was also different. No longer just the gentleness and warmth of a father loving his child. There were times when I could clearly feel the confusion in his eyes, as if he was hiding something that I couldn't understand. At times like these, my heart beats faster, as if my intuition tells me that something is wrong, but I don't want to believe it. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe it's just a passing feeling, but no matter what, this abnormality always sticks with me, making me feel that things are no longer as simple as before. As I said, my father likes to exercise, so even though he's old, he still maintains a strong and stylish body like when he was young. He's not only a father but also a model of strength and charm that I've always admired. When I look at my father, I can't deny that he's still very handsome with broad shoulders and a toned body. Every time he walks by, I still feel very fond of him. A strange feeling that I can't clearly describe. Define. Maybe it was the confidence he exuded or the strong appearance of my father that still reminded me of my childhood days when he was my whole world. But lately that feeling was a bit different. It wasn't just the admiration of a daughter for her father, but more like a vague, indescribable feeling. I found myself looking at my father longer than usual, and whenever I was near him, something inside me arose. That struck me as peculiar until one day, as usual, I returned home from school to find my father already there. He always arrived earlier than my mother and usually sat on the sofa watching TV, his eyes glued to the screen. Then my mother and usually sat on the sofa watching TV, his eyes glued to the screen. As soon as I walked in the door, I still saw him sitting there peaceful and familiar without hesitation. Even though I was grown up, I ran to him feeling like everything was so natural. I jumped on him and sat on his lap like when I was a child without a second thought. Dad hugged me like he always did, but this time something was different. The hug was still warm, but the atmosphere between us was different, making me feel less comfortable than before. Even so, I tried to push the feeling away. telling myself that it was just my imagination, but it wasn't just a fleeting feeling. I realized that something was touching me as I sat on Dad's lap. At first I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was just the uncomfortable position I was sitting in, or maybe it was something in his pocket, but the longer I sat, the more it became clear, like a presence that couldn't be ignored. My heart started to beat faster, and suddenly the atmosphere felt strange, heavy, and stuffy. I felt awkward, not knowing what to do. The closeness that had always made me feel safe now made me feel uneasy and uncomfortable. I sat still, trying to keep myself calm, but unanswered questions arose in my heart. Dad's eyes were shy and silent like mine. We both said nothing, just sat in the stuffy atmosphere until Mom suddenly walked in, breaking the atmosphere. I wanted to stand up, but it felt like my legs were tied down, unable to move. Dad didn't say anything. He just silently looked at me, and in his eyes I no longer recognized the familiar warmth of the old days. Then suddenly the sound of the door opening rang out. My mother walked in, breaking the stuffy atmosphere. We both quickly looked away from each other, and I quickly stood up, trying to act as normal as possible. But the strange feeling was still there, weighing heavily on my mother as she walked in, breaking the stuffy atmosphere. We both quickly looked away from each other, and I quickly stood up, trying to act as normal as possible. But the strange feeling was still there, weighing heavily on my heart, like something that could never be returned to the way it was before. Even though everything looked normal inside, I clearly felt the change. My dad seemed to start caring more about me. He often asked about me, paying attention to the little things in my life that he had never noticed before. He started buying me new clothes and things that I didn't ask for. Those gifts confused me at first, but gradually I realized that this care was not like fatherly love anymore. Every time it happened, I couldn't deny the strange feeling. It was like we were becoming a couple rather than father and son. The distance between me and my father was not just physical. His gaze became distant, and the moments of the silence was longer than ever. I felt something changed in the atmosphere between us, but I didn't know how to face it. Then one day, the day when the boundary between me and my father was truly broken, it was a moment I will never forget. That day my mother had to go on a business trip due to the school's proposal, leaving only me and my father at home. I had just come home from school, entered the house, and before my eyes was a completely unexpected scene on the dining table. My father had prepared a sumptuous today. I still felt it was just a coincidence, a joyful surprise, with no suspicion of anything more. My father, with his typical smile, answered that he had something positive to say about the restaurant's success, which he wanted to celebrate. I was also delighted, so I didn't question any more questions. I just wanted to enjoy this dinner with my father. We sat at the table eating and drinking together. Wine flowed evenly in the glasses, and the soft candlelight made the scene warmer and more intimate than ever. I didn't feel anything wrong at the time. Everything seemed too normal and too familiar, but from within, this closeness gradually took on a different meaning, a feeling that I couldn't put into words. We ate and bonded, recalling stories from when I was a child, when I was the little girl who always clung to my father. Sweet memories, little jokes. All of them made us both laugh, as if all the tension from before had melted away. Laughter echoed in the warm room, and the atmosphere between us seemed closer than ever. After 2 bottles of wine were finished, I felt myself starting to get drunk. My mind was hazy. The alcohol seemed to blur all reason. We sat closer to each other, and I don't know if it was my voice was quiet, but no longer like that of a child asking a father. That inquiry held a deeper meaning, as if I were asking from an entirely new perspective, one that my sober mind would never allow me to say. My father remained silent for a brief while. Then he turned to look at me, his eyes deep and attentive, as if he were scrutinizing something inside me, and he said, his voice soft, "Yes, just one word," but it was weighty and full of buried meaning. We both gazed at each other, and the space seems to stop. Between us was no longer the intimacy of father and son, but a different relationship beyond all the bounds I had ever known. I'm not sure what motivated me at the time. Perhaps it was the booze. Perhaps it was the emotion that had been buried for so long without being expressed. But when I softly stretched out and held my father's neck, a weird feeling permeated my entire body. Yet I did not stop. Don't think anymore. I only knew that, at that moment, I couldn't control myself. My father paused for a moment, but then he returned my hug, his arms wrapped around my waist, hugging me tighter. The distance between us was no longer there. We looked at each other, our eyes meeting for a long moment as if no more words were needed. We both seemed to understand each other's hidden thoughts without words. We kissed each other slowly and cautiously at first, as if we were kissing each other slowly and cautiously at first, as if we were rediscovering a familiar tenderness. But after a few seconds the hesitation disappeared, giving way to an intense, overwhelming feeling. Hugs became tighter and tighter. Not just to get closer, but as if we wanted to hold on to this moment forever. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt the warmth of my father's body making everything around me disappear. My father began to gently touch my back. His hands seemed to explore every line and every breath. The initial tenderness gradually gave way to longing caresses. As if my father could not control the rising desire, his fingers slid over every part of my body, cautious yet greedy, as if he wanted to explore everything without missing anything. Every touch, every gesture made me shiver, as if my skin knew how to respond to his every movement. My father picked me up gently but firmly, his strong arms holding me tightly, as if he didn't want to let go. Wrapped my arms around his neck, feeling each of our rapid breaths. He walked without hesitation, leading me into the room where there was no light except for the dim light from outside. At this moment we no longer cared about anything else. Not time, not space, but only each other. As if the world had stopped at this moment, all thoughts disappeared, leaving only a feeling of intense longing, a deep connection that could not be expressed in words. My father placed me on the unbuttoning my shirt. With each touch, each button undone, the feeling of being naked came not only from the clothes leaving my body but also from the vulnerability that we were both revealing. That feeling made my heart clench, but at the same time all the reservations gradually disappeared. That night we no longer held anything back. All barriers, all reservations were broken, as if the world was left with only the two of us. Every gesture, every touch, had a deeper meaning, as if wanting to engrave each other's image into our minds and bodies. We gave each other everything, not just physical intimacy, but also the fusion of emotions, of secret desires that had been suppressed for so long. That night, both of them understood that all boundaries had been erased, and there was nothing but each other's absolute presence in that moment. The next day, when my mother returned home, everything seemed to have returned to normal. My father and I acted normally, both smiling and chatting as if nothing unusual had happened that night before. My mother did not notice the change in the atmosphere. Everything went on as usual. We had breakfast together, talking about everyday things like a normal family. But inside I knew that we both knew what had happened. Although we kept our natural appearance, deep down a heavy silence had fallen between my father and me. Every look, every gesture carried a different meaning, as if we were sharing a secret that no one else could know, even though we knew it was wrong. We did not stop. Our meetings became furtive and hurried, increasing the conflict between guilt and desire. We knew it was wrong, but neither of us had any intention of stopping. Every touch, every look implied that we would continue, without words, without promises. Then one night, when my mother was fasting to sleep, my father quietly snuck into my room without me hearing a sound. I was still in a deep sleep. I was entirely ignorant that my father was sleeping next to me, his arms around me. When I awoke to the unusual warmth around my body, I turned, my head cocked slightly as I realized his familiar face was nearby. A moment of astonishment passed before my lips curled into a gentle grin, and I gently held my father. In that moment, I forgot everything around me, leaving just my father and me. Gently, "Dad, be cautious. Mom will not hear," I whispered, my voice trembling like the cold wind blowing through the crack in the door. Each word was difficult to say, as if I were trying to hold back something deep inside that was about to burst. My throat was tight, but my heart was beating strongly and erratically in my chest. My hands unconsciously tightened the blanket, trying to control the trembling that spread throughout my body. My breathing was now ragged and ragged, as if each breath was held back by, and the worry of being found eventually became an obsession. But I couldn't say no every time Dad visited. I was terrified that this secret of our adventurous love would be disclosed to others, revealing everything we had attempted to hide. I realized I was caught in this relationship, unable to leave while knowing it was going to end badly. Then one day, the day I had tried to avoid, finally came. That day, my mother called to say that something had come up. She couldn't come home as planned and would only return the next morning. A brief sense of relief passed through me and Dad. When we thought that we wouldn't be interrupted that night, we didn't worry. Thinking we still had time until the next morning, my mother suddenly came back earlier than expected without warning. We, in our carelessness, did not realize I felt smothered. My father, unable to talk, remained immobile, unable to find an excuse. The atmosphere in the home was heavy and tense, leaving little place for tolerance or pity. When my mother observed the awful truth, she said nothing, just quietly left the house. The atmosphere in the house seemed to freeze. Everything between my father and me became strange, full of indescribable embarrassment. I no longer knew what to say or do after all the secrets had been exposed. The following days passed in heavy silence. My mother did not come home, and finally she filed for divorce. My parents decided to end the marriage that I once thought was unbreakable. The house was now empty and cold. My father, who had been my support, had now become the source of my breakdown. My mother, who had loved and cared for me since I was a child, was now distant, hurt, and carrying an incurable pain in her heart. I realized that my wrong emotions and weakness had led to irreparable consequences. My entire family was broken because of choices that I never thought would lead to this outcome. The damage not only affected my mother but also me and my father, causing us to lose love, and I just know that I must find a way to face the repercussions of my actions and learn to live with this suffering for the rest of my life. I am aware that many people will blame me after hearing my narrative, claiming that I have done terrible things, but that is fine. I get it. Everyone has their own point of view, and I am ready to accept all judgmental eyes. The most important thing is that I have dared to face my truth and accepted the pain and consequences of the mistakes I have caused. My final advice to you who are listening to this story is to always be alert and maintain boundaries in any relationship, especially in the family. Sometimes love and closeness can blind us, leading to bad decisions that we never thought we would make. Remember, ever don't allow your weaknesses lead you down the wrong road that you will regret for the rest of your life. Respect boundaries and protect love and trust in the family, because once they are broken, there is no way to go back. Sometimes we only have one chance to preserve what is most important, and if we lose it, it will be the most painful thing you have to face. Thank you everyone for listening to my story. If you found this story meaningful, please support me by liking and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Thank you. I'll see you again.